I, 28F, grew up in a small town in Ohio, in a cozy house with a big backyard. My dad, 55M, was an accountant, and my mom was a high school English teacher. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Weekends were filled with barbecues, movie nights, and long walks in the nearby park. My mom would read to me every night before bed, sparking my love for literature. Dad taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework. They were my heroes. That all changed when I was 16. Mom started feeling tired all the time, and she had this persistent cough that wouldn't go away. After weeks of tests, we got the devastating news: lung cancer, stage 3. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. Mom, who had never smoked a day in her life, was now fighting for her life. The next 2 years were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and hope mixed with despair. I'd sit by her bed, reading her favorite books to her while she dozed. Dad worked tirelessly, balancing his job and taking care of Mom. I grew up fast, learning to cook, clean, and manage the household. Despite everything, Mom never lost her spirit. She'd crack jokes with the nurses and always had a smile for us, even on her worst days. But in the end, it wasn't enough. Mom passed away 2 days after my 18th birthday. The last thing she said to me was, "Live your life to the fullest, sweetie. I'll always be watching over you." I held her hand as she took her last breath, and a part of me died with her that day. For the next few years, it was just Dad and me. We leaned on each other, grieved together, and slowly started to rebuild our lives. I went off to college to study journalism, carrying Mom's love for words with me. Dad threw himself into his work, expanding his accounting firm. We'd talk on the phone every Sunday, sharing our week and keeping Mom's memory alive. I met my first serious boyfriend, Tom, in my sophomore year of college. He was a business major, charming and ambitious. We dated for 3 years, and for a while, I thought he might be the one. But as graduation approached, we realized we wanted different things. He was heading to New York for a high-powered job, and I wanted to stay closer to home, closer to Dad. We parted ways amicably, promising to stay friends. After college, I moved back to my hometown and got a job at the local newspaper. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I was making a difference in my community, and I could be there for Dad. We'd have dinner together a couple of times a week, and on weekends, we'd work on restoring an old car that had been sitting in our garage for years. Then, about 5 years ago, Dad met Sandra, 42F. She was a client at his accounting firm, recently divorced with no kids. At first, I was happy for him. He seemed lighter, smiled more. They dated for a year before getting married. I was hesitant about the whole thing, but I wanted Dad to be happy. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. Sandra was always a bit off. She'd make these passive-aggressive comments about Mom, or how Dad and I were too close. She'd try to change things in our family home, rearranging furniture or throwing out old mementos. But I brushed it off, telling myself she was just trying to fit in. I remember the first big fight I had with Sandra. It was during Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. She had insisted on hosting, saying she wanted to start new family traditions. When I arrived, I found that she had replaced all of Mom's old recipes with her own. The stuffing was store-bought, the cranberry sauce came from a can, and the turkey was dry. But what really got to me was when I noticed Mom's old china was missing from the table. When I asked about it, Sandra dismissively said she had packed it away because it was outdated. I lost it. We had a huge argument right there at the dinner table. Dad tried to play peacemaker, but I could see the hurt in his eyes too. After that, things were never the same between Sandra and me. Now, let's fast forward to the present. I've been with my fiancé, Jake, 30M, for 3 years. We met at a local charity event where I was covering the story, and he was volunteering. Jake's a software developer, kind, funny, and he gets along great with Dad. We're planning our wedding for next spring, and everything was going smoothly, until Sandra decided to stick her nose where it doesn't belong. Last week, Jake called me, sounding upset. He said Sandra had texted him, claiming she had something important to tell him about me. Apparently, she told him I'd been cheating on him with Tom, my ex-boyfriend from college. She even sent him some old photos of me and Tom together, claiming they were recent. I was furious. Those photos were from years ago, before I even met Jake. I've always been faithful to him, and the idea of cheating makes me sick. But Sandra had spun this whole story, saying she'd seen me sneaking around and that she felt obligated to tell Jake the truth. Jake was devastated. He said he needed some time to think, that he didn't know what to believe. I tried to explain, but he was too upset to listen. He left our apartment, saying he'd be staying with a friend for a few days. I couldn't believe Sandra would do this. I mean, I knew she was difficult, but this was a whole new level of crazy. I called Dad, crying and trying to explain what happened. He was shocked, said he'd talk to Sandra and get to the bottom of it. That was 3 days ago. Jake still isn't home, and he's barely responding to my texts. I'm scared I'm going to lose him over this lie. Dad keeps saying he's trying to handle it, but I don't know what that means. I'm lost. I don't know how to fix this. Part of me wants to confront Sandra directly, but I'm afraid that'll just make things worse. I love Jake, and I can't bear the thought of losing him over this nonsense. And I'm angry at Dad for not seeing Sandra for who she really is. I guess I'm looking for advice. How do I clear my name? How do I get Jake to believe me? And what do I do about Sandra? She's torn my life apart, and I don't know if I can ever forgive her for this. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It's been a crazy few days, but I have some updates. After my last post, I decided I couldn't just sit around waiting for things to blow over. I needed to take action. I started by gathering evidence to prove Sandra was lying. I dug up old social media posts, timestamps on the photos she'd sent Jake, and even reached out to Tom for help. Contacting Tom was awkward, to say the least. We hadn't spoken in years, apart from the occasional happy birthday message. When I explained the situation, he was shocked. He remembered Sandra from the few times they'd met at family gatherings, and he'd always felt there was something off about her. Tom was more than willing to help. He wrote a detailed statement confirming when we dated and that we hadn't been in contact for years. He even offered to talk to Jake directly if needed. While gathering evidence, I stumbled upon something interesting. In one of the photos Sandra had sent Jake, Tom and I were at a coffee shop that had closed down 5 years ago. It was a small detail, but it proved the photo couldn't be recent. I felt a glimmer of hope. Then I called Jake. I told him I needed to see him face to face, that this was too important to discuss over the phone. He agreed to meet me at a park near his friend's place. It was where we had our third date, and I hoped the familiar setting might help. When we met, Jake looked tired and stressed. I could see the hurt in his eyes, and it broke my heart. But I was determined to set things right. We sat on a bench overlooking the pond where we used to feed ducks together. I laid out all the evidence I'd gathered, explaining each piece carefully. I showed him the timestamps on the photos, the old social media posts, and Tom's statement. As Jake went through everything, I could see the realization dawning on his face. When I pointed out the detail about the closed coffee shop, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and regret. He apologized for doubting me, saying he should have known better. We talked for hours, clearing the air and reaffirming our love and trust in each other. Jake moved back into our apartment that night. We're not completely back to normal yet. There's still some healing to do, but we're working through it together. He's promised to always come to me first if he ever hears rumors or accusations in the future. With Jake and I on solid ground again, it was time to deal with Sandra. I called Dad and told him we needed to have a family meeting. He agreed, sounding tired and defeated. The next day, I went to their house. It was strange being back there. The place where I grew up now felt foreign, with Sandra's touches everywhere. Mom's old reading nook had been turned into a home gym, and the walls were covered in modern art instead of our family photos. Sandra was there, looking smug when I walked in. But that smugness quickly faded when Dad asked her to explain her actions. At first, she tried to deny everything, claiming she was just looking out for me. But when I presented the evidence showing how she'd manipulated the situation, she started to crumble. Dad was furious. I'd never seen him so angry, not even when I crashed his car as a teenager. He demanded to know why she'd do this, why she'd try to ruin my relationship. Sandra broke down, crying and saying she felt threatened by my relationship with Dad. She admitted to feeling jealous of the bond we shared, claiming she was afraid of being pushed out of the family. I was stunned. I'd known Sandra had issues, but I never realized how deep they ran. Dad was equally shocked. He told Sandra that her behavior was unacceptable, that she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The meeting ended with Dad asking Sandra to leave the house for a while. He said he needed time to think about their relationship and whether it could continue after this betrayal. Sandra left in tears, begging for another chance. As for me and Dad, we had a long talk after Sandra left. He apologized for not seeing the signs earlier, for letting things get to this point. We both cried, remembering Mom and how different things were now. But we also reaffirmed our bond, promising to always be there for each other. I left feeling drained but relieved. Jake and I are okay. Sandra's true colors have been revealed, and Dad finally sees what's been happening. It's not a perfect resolution, but it's a start. There's still a lot to figure out. Dad needs to decide what to do about his marriage. Jake and I need to rebuild some trust, and I'm still processing my anger towards Sandra. But for now, I'm just grateful that the truth is out, and that I haven't lost the people I love most. I'll update again if anything significant happens. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It really helped me find the courage to confront this situation head-on. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and a lot has happened. I wanted to wait until things settled down a bit before posting again. First, the good news. Jake and I are doing much better. We've had a lot of long talks about trust, communication, and our future together. We even started couples counseling, not because we're having problems, but because we want to make sure we have the tools to handle any future challenges. Our wedding plans are back on track, and if anything, this whole ordeal has made us stronger as a couple. We've been spending more time with our friends too. Last weekend, we had a game night with some couples we know. It was the first time we'd really socialized since the whole Sandra incident, and it felt good to laugh and just be normal again. Jake held my hand under the table all night, and I caught him looking at me with so much love in his eyes. It reminded me of why I fell for him in the first place. Now, for the family drama. Remember how I said Dad had asked Sandra to leave the house? Well, it turns out that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Dad did a lot of thinking and talking. With me, with his friends, even with the therapist he started seeing. He realized that his relationship with Sandra had been unhealthy for a long time, and her attempt to sabotage my relationship was the last straw. Dad confided in me that he'd been having doubts about his marriage for a while. He said he'd ignored the red flags, convincing himself that he was just being overly sensitive or that things would get better with time. He admitted that part of him had rushed into marriage with Sandra because he was lonely after Mom died, and he regretted not taking things slower. About 2 weeks after the confrontation, Dad called me to say he'd decided to end his marriage to Sandra. He said he couldn't trust her anymore, and he didn't want to be with someone who would hurt his daughter like that. I was surprised by how calm and sure he sounded. It was like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Dad filed for divorce the next day. Sandra didn't take it well. She showed up at the house crying and begging him to reconsider. When that didn't work, she started making threats, saying she'd ruin him financially if he went through with the divorce. Dad stood his ground, telling her it was over. That's when things got really crazy. Sandra started calling me, leaving voicemails and sending texts. At first, she was apologetic, swearing she'd never do anything like that again. But when I didn't respond, she got angry. She accused me of turning Dad against her, saying I'd always been jealous of their relationship. One of her voicemails was particularly disturbing. She said, "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I'll make sure you and your precious daddy regret this." It sent chills down my spine. I blocked her number, but she found other ways to contact me. She even showed up at my workplace once, causing a scene in the lobby before security escorted her out. It was embarrassing and scary. My coworkers were supportive, but I could tell they were uncomfortable. My boss pulled me aside and suggested I take a few days off until things calmed down. The whole situation was taking a toll on me. I was having trouble sleeping, jumping at every little noise. Jake suggested we stay with his parents for a few days, just to get away from it all. It helped, but I felt guilty for leaving Dad to deal with Sandra alone. Finally, about a week ago, Sandra reached out one last time. This time, her tone was different. She sounded defeated. She begged me to talk to Dad, to convince him to take her back. She said she had nowhere else to go, that she'd lose everything in the divorce. I'll admit, for a moment I felt a twinge of pity. But then I remembered all the pain she'd caused, how she'd almost destroyed my relationship with Jake. I told her I wouldn't help her, that she needed to accept the consequences of her actions and leave us alone. Since then, it's been quiet. Dad says Sandra's lawyer has been in touch about the divorce proceedings, so it looks like she's finally accepted that it's over. As for me and Dad, we're doing okay. We've been spending more time together, trying to rebuild our relationship without Sandra's influence. It's been nice. Reminds me of how things were before she came into our lives. We've even talked about selling the house and both moving to new places. A fresh start for both of us. Last Sunday, Dad and I spent the afternoon going through old photo albums. We laughed and cried as we reminisced about Mom and our life before Sandra. Dad apologized again for letting Sandra come between us. He said he felt like he'd failed Mom by letting someone like Sandra into our lives. I assured him that Mom would understand and that what matters is that we're together now. Jake has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's really bonded with Dad, often joining us for dinner or to watch sports. It makes me happy to see the two most important men in my life getting along so well. Last night, Jake surprised us with tickets to a baseball game. Dad's favorite team. Seeing Dad smile and relax for the first time in weeks was worth everything we've been through. I know we're not out of the woods yet, The divorce proceedings will probably get messy, and who knows what Sandra might do next. But for now, I'm feeling optimistic. My relationship is stronger than ever, I have Dad back, and we're free from Sandra's toxic influence. Thank you all again for your support throughout this crazy journey. Your advice and kind words have meant more than you know. I'm not sure if I'll post another update. Hopefully, things will be boring and drama-free from here on out.